The context diagram puts the process in context of its surroundings. The context diagram will identify the process purpose and its boundaries. It does not describe the process in detail, rather it defines the overall scope, and identifies all the items that influence it or are influenced by it. Additionally, relationships are established with connecting lines and the direction of the influence is depicted with an arrowhead. The objects you would expect to identify in a context diagram are all the organizations that interact with a process from an external perspective. These would be customer and supplier organizations. All the processes that produce inputs needed by the subject process, and all the processes that depend on outputs from the subject process under study. The major inputs and outputs will be identified. These provide an understanding of when the process begins and when the process ends. The key information systems that are used by the process will be indicated. This puts in context the impact that technology has on the process and the potential scope of impact on systems that can result from a changed process. This is a list of systems, not an information flow diagram. All the other related initiatives that could impact or be impacted by this project need to be identified. The context diagram is a scope communication document. It not only communicates what is in scope, but also what is out of scope. It describes information that is key to setting up a project correctly. Here are a few questions that context model answer. Take a few seconds to review. The knowledge required to build the context diagram will mostly come from the project champion. The landscape of the systems should be confirmed with the process owner, as well as the project champion. The project manager will define project boundaries and determine project resources for execution and governance by using scope information included in the context diagram. The steps of developing and documenting the context diagram involve establishing the scope of the project during the goals clarification step with the project champion. Additional interviews with the designate systems architect can be used to clarify systems. Finally, interviews and reviews of the context diagram with subject matter experts identified by the project champion will complete and confirm the business context of the process under consideration. Prepare the interview guide. Be sure that the interview guide used with the project champion during the goals clarification portion of the PE methodology includes questions that will provide information required to complete the context diagram. Conduct interview project champion. Since much of the data required for the context diagram can be collected in a well-executed interview with the project champion, it is important to plan data collection for this purpose into the interview. During the interview with the project champion, ask questions that pertain to the context diagram. Collect the information. If possible, sketch the context diagram for discussion and clarification. Whenever the project champion is uncertain of the answer, or simply does not know, be sure to ask for the name of and subject matter experts that you can interview to get the answer. Interview subject matter experts. Complete data collection for the systems and data inputs and outputs by interviewing the data architect. Also, complete interviews with subject matter experts to clarify and confirm the context diagram. Document the context. Use the template to document all the elements of the context diagram. Ensure you are clear on the linkages and direction of influences. If not, place a call to the subject matter experts to clarify. Communicate and seek agreement. The context diagram will evolve during the course of both customer and product requirements activity, and represents an understanding and agreement between the requirements, data architect, project champion and other stakeholders. Therefore, it is critical that the context diagram is viewed as a living document, which is reviewed and updated frequently throughout the project. Furthermore, it is recommended that the context diagram be made easily accessible to all stakeholders and published using simple, but effective, revision history procedures. This part of the project is highly dependent on the project champion's time, ideas, and willingness to participate. If the project champion is not engaged or available, then the project should be delayed or cancelled. Clarification and agreement of the context diagram by systems knowledgeable subject matter experts and other business area subject matter experts are important to get the scoping right. Having the scoping questions answered up front will pay off throughout the project. A single box or circle at the center of the model with the process name, purpose, begins with, ends with defined briefly inside the shape. This represents everything in scope of the process. This figure is the center or focal point of the page. Supplying processes provide inputs to the process under consideration. Supplying processes are usually not more than 3 to 4. Constraints controls are policies, budget, boundaries, sacred cows, etc. are guidelines within which the process must operate. Receiving processes are the recipients of the outputs of the process under consideration. Related activities could be initiatives that should be consulted for any impact during the re-engineering project. These are better known as calls. Key systems that are used in the process as well as key systems that are used to provide input or output data to and from the subject process. Key personnel that are critical to support the execution of the process. Other essential resources that are required to execute the process. Key inputs or outputs to and from the focal process, that is the subject of the project. Inputs and outputs are usually not more than 4 to 6. Arrowheads on the links between objects to communicate the direction of influence. Use crisp and short phrases and sentences to avoid clutter. Be sure that descriptions are carefully chosen to communicate on their own merit. Goals clarification step of the portfolio management methodology. Since much of the data required for the context diagram can be collected in a well-executed interview with the project champion during the goals clarification step, it is important to plan data collection for this purpose into the interview. Level 2 business information models and methods, if required during the as-is baseline step are, a correlation between these models and the context diagram should identify if all scope information was correctly projected when the context diagram was created. If not, the context diagram should be updated and a scope discussion should be held with the project champion. It could be scope creep or a misunderstanding that needs to be corrected. Systems and information. Process, organizational and initiative interaction. Additional information about modeling can be found in integration definition for function modeling.